All right, everyone. I am going to try to tell you what we did in class with this prose analysis prompt about Huckleberry Finn. Won't be as exciting because we won't have everybody on there, and I've been trying to get this recorded, but fourth time is the charm, so we'll get it. Okay. So with this essay, and this is going to be the only kind of essay that they've got on the AP exam, you are given a prose piece to read. So it's like a section from a chapter, it's the opening of a book, it's something. And then you are asked to look at how they wrote it. So you're trying to find specific literary devices or strategies that they used to write this. Okay? So that is your goal. And I looked at all different kinds of exams to see that the kinds of questions they're asking. And so we're going to do some papers. Excuse me, cat, go away. Sorry, I have a cat that's trying to help. So we're going to be doing essays that cover a variety of different kinds of questions. The first one that we have that I wanted to do was about characterization. Okay, so sometimes a prose question, and this may be the question we get on the test, don't know, asks about a character and how that character is created. Okay, so let's take a look at this question that we have right here. So, it says, read the passage carefully, then in a well-organized essay, analyze the literary techniques Twain uses to characterize Pap Finn when Huck first encounters him. Okay? So what you'll need to do is you have to read it, obviously, and figure out what kind of character this person is. Okay? And then once you have done that, then you can start looking at the literary techniques that were used to do that. So you'll read it first, decide what kind of character we're dealing with, and then look at how that was done. We already know about Pap Finn. We all hate him. Horrible dad, horrible guy. So we don't need to read through this again. I did in class, but you guys can go ahead and just read it on your own. I'm going to show you what you would want to do as you're writing this up. Okay? So there are a number of ways that we create a character, okay? And the first way is through physical description. Okay, so I'm going to just write that over here. So we got physical description, and quite often an author will use imagery, create some images as to what we see here. So I'm going to mark in blue our physical description of Pap, and that is mostly in this second paragraph here. So here we have first, he was most 50 and he looked it. Okay, I'm 50. I don't know what that means, so I'm getting a little worried here. His hair was long and tangled and greasy and hung down, and you could see his eyes shining through like he was behind vines. It was all black, no gray. So was his long mixed up whiskers. Okay. There weren't no color in his face. Where his face showed, it was white. Not like another man's white, but a white to make a body sick, a white to make a body's flesh crawl, a tree-toad white, a fish belly white, and for his clothes, just rags. That was all. He had one ankle rested on the other knee, a boot on a foot that was busted and two of his toes stuck through. And then also he has a hat, a black slouch with the top caved in. So here we got very clear physical imagery. He's nasty, okay? He's greasy, so we've got this long, tangled, greasy hair. This suggests that he is not very clean, okay? He is unclean, unbathed. And then he has eyes shining through like he was behind vines. And so some people pointed out in class today, this sounds like he's almost a predator. Like he's behind these vines, like he's something that's wild, okay? Like a wild animal who is just kind of waiting for its victim to do something. He's going to jump out from the vines and attack. Okay? And then his hair was black. His whiskers, he's got a long beard there. Okay? So we've got this black contrasted with this white. So he's very black and white. And it's not just white. So look at, this is a lot of fun imagery here. It's going to make a body sick. Okay? It's going to make you feel sick how white he is. Make your flesh crawl. So he's not just telling us this. Twain is then going to show us a tree-toad white, a fish belly white. Okay? So if you think about that, if you're holding a tree toad or a fish belly, it's cold and it's clammy and it's damp. And so a human that is described as like kind of cool and damp, we could say moist. I hate that word, but it totally fits here. And kind of clammy, not a pleasant person. Okay. Then for his clothes, they're rags. So it sounds like he's unclean. He is careless. So the hat is just lying on the floor. Okay. So this feels very careless, very dirty, very ugh. All right. So physically, we have a very clear description of what he looks like. So you'd want to mention this, okay? That the kinds of imagery that's going on and how the imagery makes you feel, all right? Throughout all of this, notice that we do have some very clear tone coming through, which is creating a mood. So if you look at these words that Twain is using to describe someone, like fish belly white, that's what an interesting, disgusting, imagery. I love it. So the tone is very uncomfortable, uneasy. And so the mood that it's creating for you is kind of like it gives you kind of the creepy crawlies in a way. All right. So throughout all of this, if you notice things that are with the tone and the mood, kudos. That tone and mood are also literary techniques. He's setting the tone, creating a mood in the readers that make him go, ugh, I don't like this guy. He feels very uncomfortable. Okay. So physical is one way that you want to explain how they're creating the character. The next thing that you want to look at is speech. Okay. So let me slide this up a little bit so we can get his speech somewhere here. So you can tell a lot about somebody based on their language and what they are saying. Okay. So language, speech, all of this falls under diction. Okay. So diction is very important here. Let's look at some of the things he says. The very first thing he says is starchy clothes. You think you're a good deal of a big bug, don't you? I have no idea what this phrase means. All right. So it's like he has his own little bit of language there. Okay. And then he says, don't you give me none of your lip. And then he says, I'll take you down a peg before I get done with you. All right. There's definitely a very threatening tone here. So very threatening language, creating very threatening tone and a mood for us. Okay. So, and then he goes on, you think you're better than your father now. Very aggressive, very abusive. He's verbally abusive. And then he says, well, who told you could be learning things? And Huck says, well, the widow, she told me. The widow, eh? And who told the widow she could put in her shovel? I have no idea what this means, but I like the phrase. Who told her she could put in a shovel about a thing that ain't none of her business? Nobody never told her, says Huck. Well, I'll learn her how to meddle. Okay. So again, it's very threatening. Usually you would think, oh, a nice old widow, you're going to be respectful and kind. No, he's out to get her. And notice here too how he says, I'll learn her instead of teach. Okay. So obviously his grammar is leaves something to be desired. He is clearly uneducated. Okay. Trying to not put my hand on here so it won't move around. So he's uneducated, and it shows. His language is rough and coarse. He doesn't even know how to use verbs properly. Okay. And so we got a lot of examples of that through here. None of the family could read or write. Another. Okay. You're swelling yourself up. I ain't the man to stand for it. And then, so he's, looky here. It's not exactly very grammatically correct. So his language and his speech gives him away. All right, the kind of words that he uses. So the next thing that you could look at, so we've got physical and we've got his speech and his language. The next thing to look at would be the actions that he creates, what he does. Let me put this in a different color here. Okay, so let's go with green. Let's go action in green. Let's go. Yay, green go. Okay. So let's look at the things that he does in this passage. First of all, how did he even get in the room? So if we look here in the middle, he had clumb in by the shed. I just keep wanting to fix it. Climbed, whatever. So he snuck in. Okay, and as somebody pointed out in class, is like a criminal. He's sneaking around. So if we've got somebody who's sneaking around and being kind of a criminal, that tells us a lot about their character. They don't follow the rules. They don't care. They're going to do things their own way. Okay? So he's climbing into the shed, and then by the shed, and then right above it, notice this, it tilted his chair back a little. You may hear your teachers go, stop tilting your chair, and we tell you because we don't want you to tip over and get hurt. But well, frankly, we don't mind because we think it's funny when you tip over. But then we have to sometimes fill out a report, so we don't want to do that. The other thing, though, is that it just feels disrespectful. Okay? So imagine that you get called up to Mr. Reynolds' office because you've been done bad in some class. Teacher's mad at you. They send you up to the office. Would you sit in that chair across from his desk and then lean it back up against the wall? I mean, you wouldn't. That's very casual, very disrespectful. You'd be sitting straight up and down on the edge of that seat, just like, oh, please don't get mad at me. Okay. So it's a disrespectful kind of casual way that he is. And he's already snuck in. He acts like a criminal. Okay. Notice what he does down here at the bottom when he has Huck read to him. Okay. He says, he's mad at that Huck can read it. He fetched the book a whack by his hand and knocked it across the house. Okay, again, very disrespectful. Nobody throw a book across the house. Don't do that. That's not nice. Okay, but he's hidden it right out of his son's hand. So it's disrespectful. It's aggressive. Okay, so we can evaluate what kind of person he is based on what he's doing. All right, and again, this is all lending to the tone and the mood. It's making us feel uncomfortable. It's making us feel a little bit worried, uneasy. Because if he's going to be smacking around a book and you're just kind of waiting, he's going to smack Huck. We don't want that to happen to Huck. All right. So then the next thing, so we've got physical, we've got their behavior, their speech, and then you look at the attitude of the other characters in there. Okay. So that's the next thing we want to look at is attitude of other characters, and our other character is Huck. Okay, so where we've got a lot of that, it's actually at the very beginning. Let me put that in yellow. Okay. So let's take a look at Huck here. No, go ahead. Sorry, I'm just talking to myself. Don't mind. I don't listen to myself either. So the very beginning here, we have Huck says I had shut the door to. Then I turned around and there he was. Oh, there he is. I used to be scared of him all the time. He tanned me so much. So when someone says they're being tanned, I'm going to tan your hide. So back in the day, part of the way of turning a cowhide into leather was treating it with all different kinds of things. They would actually rub poo into it. I know it's disgusting. And they would beat it and they would do other things to it. You're pretty much abusive to cowhide to turn it into leather. All right. So if somebody's saying they tanned my hide, it means they beat a lot. A lot of spankings, whippings, the belt, the switch, whatever. Okay. So Huck says, I used to be scared of him all the time. He tanned me so much. I reckoned I was scared now too. But, look at this lovely little but. So we've got a shift here. Okay. And just like we have it in poetry, if we have a but in prose, it signals a shift. But in a minute I see I was mistaken. That is, after the first jolt, as you may say, when my breath sort of hitched, you're like, oh, there he is, he being so unexpected. But right away, after I see him, I weren't scared of him. Okay? He realizes that he's not afraid of him anymore. So this is the interesting part here. How do the other characters react? And so one thing that I was reading just yesterday about writing these kinds of prompts, and somebody pointed it out, is that you want to look for complexity. What is the complexity in this situation? So in here we've got a really complex relationship. Okay, so your complexity in these kinds of character questions are always going to be about relationship. What is Huck's relationship with his father now? We know what it used to be. His father used to beat him and everything. But now Huck says he's got a different attitude toward him. So you could talk about that. So I would when you're writing this prompt about the prose, I would look, the physical descriptions, the language, the behavior, his the way he's acting, the tone, and then I would sum it up, at the end and work this into your conclusion about the complexity of their relationship. This is what it all builds up to. How does Huck respond to him now? So here's some questions to think about. Why is Huck no longer afraid of him? And as we discussed it with the class, students were pointing out that, well, Huck is now educated himself. Okay, so let's see if I got any room to put this somewhere. I'll slide it over here. So Huck is beginning to get some education. Yeah, just like pretend there's just the other. So Huck's getting some education, and he is better than his dad. He's been living with the widow Douglas, and so he can see how life can be different. Obviously, she's not beating him all the time. So he's got some greater perspective. He's also a little bit more mature than he used to be. He's probably a little bit bigger in body, okay? 13-year-old boys aren't that big yet. Usually by the time they're 15 is when they get their growth spurt. But he's definitely a bit bigger. And so he's not as intimidated by his father. And as somebody pointed out, I think it was Jamie pointed out in period 4, it seems like he has a little bit of pity for his father. And so when you read through this again, you can kind of hear, he's like, man, my dad is really pathetic, isn't he? So there's this complex relationship there, and you would want to explain that. So Huck used to be afraid of his father, but he no longer is. Here's how his father looks. Here's father acts and what he says. And then at the end, sum it up. So now Huck is no longer that afraid of his father. He's beginning to see him more for what he is, and Huck's beginning to realize his own worth and his own value. And his power is increasing while Pap Finn's power is decreasing. So anything along those lines. Think about what you're seeing in there, okay? But so when we're doing characterization, all right, look at all the different ways the person is characterized, and then look at the complex relationship that's going on there, okay? So this write-up is due tomorrow before midnight, Wednesday, okay? So you've got some time to do this, all right? Thanks, guys.